In today's gospel, Jesus models the most important thing that we can do for ourselves in ministry. He models self-care. Now, we're only in the first chapter of Mark at this point, but as we've seen through our readings throughout this season after the Epiphany, Jesus has been very busy. And so he takes this moment to go by himself, and as we hear in the gospel this morning, to pray. What Jesus is really doing is just taking time to be with the Father. What Jesus is doing is something we should all do, taking that time to be present with God. And this is one of the things that I have learned in my own ministry. Because as I've continually seen and relearned in the hardest ways imaginable, is that I need a break. I need some time to get away, to be present with God. And it isn't just about taking a vacation, taking a break. It's really about regrowth. It's really about being re-rooted in the work that we do, being re-energized to serve God better in this world. And we can only do that work if God is present in our lives, if we allow God to be present in our lives, if we're taking time to be with God. And I say we, because this isn't just something that we as clergy should do. This is something that we're all called to do. And that's especially true for our leaders in the church, whether they be lay or ordained. But all of us are called to do the work of God in this world. So we all need to take time. We all need to take time to have that moment to pause, that moment to let God in. We need to take that time. Daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly. We need to take the time to foster, develop, and grow our relationship with God. That means taking a break from everything else around us to focus on God alone. And we've seen that we have, that need to foster, develop that relationship with God. We've seen that need for a break to do so. We've seen that in these times, now more than ever, as we've been living in this pandemic, and as we've been living with the events that have built up to that pandemic and to where we are today. We need to take time for rest. We need to take that time to be with God. The unfortunate truth, though, is that the world doesn't want us to take that time. We see that in this gospel today in the example of the disciples. Here's Jesus taking the necessary break from it all, taking the time to recharge, to be with the Father. And the first thing the disciples do is go off to find him and bring him back in. They want to take him away from that time of having that break, of being present with God. Not necessarily intentionally, but because they want everything that they can get from him. The disciples take Jesus away from this moment of being with God. And as we see so often, the world, maybe even those around us, want to take us from that time too. Want to pull us back in to that busyness that we see around the world. So to counteract this work of the world, there's two things I call on you to do. First is to take that time that you need, daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly, to be with God, to be by yourself with the Lord. We often call this time retreat, and it's something that's seen as necessary for clergy. My hope is that we will begin to see it as necessary for everyone in the church, because we all do the work of God in this world. And it's especially important for all of our leaders to do this too. And by that, I don't just mean the clergy. I don't just mean your wardens. I don't just mean your vestry members. If you've served on a committee, if you've been a server or a reader in church, if you've helped with an outreach project, no matter what it is that you're doing, make sure you take that time to be with God. And take that time in whatever way is best for you. And if you need some help with that, there's quite a few resources on my blog, the Reverend Trey's Thoughts, all one word, .blogspot.com. You can go on there and find some resources that might help you out as you take this time to be present with God and God alone. The second thing I would ask is something that I think this church here, St. Peter's, is very equipped to do from what I've seen. And that's to make sure that your leaders are and can take time to rest in the Lord. One thing I'd say is make sure whoever your next priest is here, make sure that they have that time as well. And I'm not saying to constantly check in and make sure that whoever your next priest is taking a retreat day at least once a month, that is doing all the things they need to do for their own self-care and their own building of their relationship with God. Because oftentimes, constantly checking in like that doesn't help. In fact, it often makes things worse. Instead, make sure that whoever your next priest is does have that time to set aside for his or her own time and reflection with God. Make sure that you foster a culture here. Maybe it'd be better to say continue to foster a culture here, where it's possible for all of your leaders, not just ordained, but lay. Your leaders, lay and ordained. Allow them to have this time. Foster a culture that allows for them to have that time, to be present and build their relationship with God. Really support your leaders. Support them in their ministry. And make sure you thank them for the service that they do, especially right now. Because this is a hard situation that we're all living in, and it's something that none of us could ever have expected. Jesus shows us the importance of self-care, particularly in modeling taking time to be with God. The world doesn't want us to have that time. So don't be like the world. Give your leaders, give yourselves the space needed to deepen all of our relationships